Thank you for that. And with that, we can get started. Mickey, is everybody in? Are we good to get started? Awesome. So thank you for joining us this month for our Unlock Higher Education monthly speaker series. Super excited about our guest speaker today. Comes with extreme experience, and I just love when we get to share that and impart that knowledge and that expertise into our members. And so I hope that you guys have pen and pencil together, or your digital writing tool together, so you can get some great tips and notes. But also he's here to answer many of your questions. But with that, I first like to break into our rooms. As you know, Unlock Higher Education has always been in the mentality of breaking down silos. And so we want to be able to have you guys connect and talk about the work that you're doing. So if you'll take a few minutes just to introduce yourselves in your breakout room, and talk about the work you're doing. So we want to be all like updated. This is hard work. As I always say, this is hard work. This is challenging work. This is slow to progress work. And so the more that we can connect, the more that we can link resources, the more that we can build our network, the more solidified that we can become in our voice. And so this is why we, make that space for you guys to get to know each other. So with that, I'll leave it to Mickey to break into a few of the rooms so that you can talk about where you're at, what makes you, what brings you here, and what you're doing today. Quick minute, make sure everybody is settled in. And as usual, we open the floor for a few individuals that may want to share. How was their breakout room? Did they learn something new? Did they meet somebody new? Did they able to learn about the great work that is being done in communities out there? So if I have somebody to share. And I consulted and make sure that I don't put them on the spot, but I wanted to um, you know, not only a shout out to I think a new concept, not new concept, but definitely new knowledge to me of the great work that is being done in Pittsburgh. And I wanted to bring that up to the front. And I want to introduce to you guys Jeremy. And Jeremy has been with us for some time now, but the amazing amount of work that he's been doing in that period of time, I just wanted him to give you like a little synopsis. So for those who don't know what's going on with Pittsburgh, Jeremy, welcome, and give us an update.
Hello, everyone. We're all snowed in, so don't mind my hoodie and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
our homebodiedness today. It's nice to see everyone. I've participated in these events for some time, but I was incarcerated about 11 years ago, and for 3 years I was able to share knowledge that I had from Business Savvy by developing an entrepreneurial curriculum. And 200 men were able to take that, and I really got to see the sparkle in guys' eyes light up. Upon returning, I came back and created an entrepreneurial incubator here in Pittsburgh called Break It, which stands for Break Institutional Trauma. We focus on people's gifts, talents, and passions and their futures rather than their flaws and their paths and their labels. And we really, inspire people to take their lived experience and, solutions to problems, essentially. And to that end, we've recently created something called the Justice Impact Challenge, which is a pitch competition, which goes live at our Allegheny County Reentry Coalition's annual conference for the first time in March, right ahead of our NFL draft happening here in Pittsburgh, which we had to put a little early because of that. But we've got a lot of really awesome things. We have 17 startups under our belt, and to date, I've done all of this work completely unfunded. So we are now a 501c3 and really trying to, produce revenue so that we can build this project out. And I've also been accepted by an organization called Dream.org to their 2025 cohort. If anyone's ever heard of that lovely organization, love their work. They really get it, and they and I are in talks to try to maybe do some of this work on more of a national scale, which would be really awesome, you know. And so, that's kind of what we're doing on this end. And I appreciate the involvement of this organization and the good work you do, and hope I can involve myself any way I'm able.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Jeremy. I was not aware of all of that great work that is being done in Pittsburgh. So thank you for letting us know, keeping us connected. And now I know, where to send my people for resources. Definitely. Anybody else want to share before we hop on to our guest speaker? All right. Well, then I will be hopping on to our guest speaker today, and super excited to introduce Noah with us. We have been in conversations in the past with Vera and bringing in a community together last year to see how we can best, fit this current changes in climate and how that, advocacy would look like. And I know that, Vera and JFF have done some awesome work in getting this, riding the waves, if you will, and getting this advocacy pushed forward and not losing all that great work that it's being done in our communities or that it's been done in the past. And so Noah has been in the forefront on making sure that that continues on. And with that, Noah Bein is a director in policy and advocacy at Jobs for the Future. He works closely with the Center for Justice and Economic Advancement to steer JFS strategy efforts at the state and federal levels to remove barriers for people with criminal records. Before joining JFF, Bein led policy, research, and advocacy campaigns for the Pew Charitable Trust Public Safety Performance Project and the Justice Action Network. Some big hitters there. Enacting youth and criminal justice reform legislation in states across the country. Incredible. He began his career working with kids and families involved in the Washington, D.C. youth justice system. His educational background is a bachelor's degree in history from Brandeis University. I hope I didn't kill that one. And at Massachusetts, and a master's degree in public policy analysis from NYU Graduate School of Public Service. Noah, it's super excited that you're here. Thank you for coming and joining us and imparting your knowledge, expertise to us here. And so we value that time, and I'll bring it on to you now.
Thank you so much, Judith. It is great to be here. It's really nice to see you all. And I will say that while JFF is doing some great work, and I'm very happy to be coordinating policy for the organization, there's so much that I've learned about prison education or about all the different issues, what Jeremy just mentioned, entrepreneurship. There's so many facets of this that I've learned about since my time at JFF that I definitely want to emphasize that I hope we can do some interactive back and forth learning in addition to me just rambling on to the extent that I do that here. But I am happy to talk a little bit about our work and some of the policy prongs we've got and why we think those are important, and maybe just some general thoughts that I have about advocacy in this space, and really just some bubbles to put up there for you all to pop or to for you to put your own ideas out there. So I'll say if you have questions or comments, please just jump in, and obviously we'll have a great discussion too. So, but maybe just to level set, I work for Jobs for the Future. That is an organization that works to transform the education and workforce systems to drive economic mobility for people, economic success for businesses and communities. And so we have a North Star mission of getting 75 million Americans into good quality jobs by 2033. And so it shouldn't be news to anyone on this call that a huge portion of that needs to be addressed to getting people with criminal records good jobs, given that 1 in 3 Americans has a record. 2/3 of unemployed men who have reached age 35 have a criminal record. It's really the scale of the problem is not, it's one of those things that I think folks maybe in our line of work understand or our backgrounds understand, but the average citizen on the street is pretty shocked by. And so to address that, I do policy for JFF's Center for Justice and Economic Advancement, excuse me. And our center's mission is to get good quality jobs and pathways to economic mobility for folks with criminal records who have histories of being impacted by the system up into including incarceration. And so we partner with employers, education and training providers, corrections agencies, and other stakeholders to promote education, job training, fair chance employment for people in corrections facilities and their communities. And so, obviously, there's a few different approaches to that. We have employer-facing work, which is a huge part of our work, which is really about working directly with employers who are interested or have some sort of connection to trying to hire people with records, but don't necessarily know how. So it's about changing narratives, but also getting into the weeds with, say, HR professionals about what actually you need to do to build in the normalizing of hiring people with criminal records. And so another piece I think is the education and job training expansion, sort of talent development, we call it. And I'll talk more about that in the context of an initiative that we have that we've just launched called Fair Chance to Advance. We'll be working very intensely with 4 different states to expand their ecosystem of fair chance hiring, including prison-based education and job training, policy, working with employers, reentry services and supports across the board. So we can come back to that in a moment. And then obviously, I work with our senior director, Brandon Mondato, on policy and systems change. Jobs for the Future has a policy and advocacy team more broadly that works on the Hill and in the States on workforce and education policy, not necessarily related to the criminal legal system. And so it's been really an interesting role for me to work with those colleagues who are experts and have the connections on the help committees or the education and workforce committees on the Hill, and to bring their credibility into our space. It's been a good vehicle for getting across a lot of the messages that I and you all work on every day around people with records. Couple quick things on the policy and advocacy side. We are about to put out a workforce justice policy agenda, which kind of gets specific about the nuts and bolts of what policymakers at the state and federal level can do. Many of these recommendations are based on the legwork of other organizations or advocates, especially impacted people going back many years. However, we have really tried to dig in and come up with some new ideas around, especially around areas that overlap with our work around job training, workforce, reentry, provider programming, remote work, and hiring. So look forward to that. I'll make sure that the coalition gets a copy of that when it does come out. It sort of builds in details around a normalizing opportunity framework, which I will put in the chat. This is sort of a more broad-based set of principles, but I do like mentioning it because I really like that framing. When I came to JFF, I've only been at JFF actually a little more than a year and a few months, but I love the normalizing opportunity. I think so many things in the system are about challenges and barriers, or about remarkable, sometimes very successful pilots or a miracle that took place. And I know a lot of policy that I've worked on that I'm most proud of and that coalitions I've been part of have worked on is about making what works normal, making it the default, not a special privilege, but that everyone should have access to high quality prison education and job training, no matter what, because it benefits everyone, that kind of thing. And so I like that framing, and I'll make sure you all have a chance to take a look at that when I drop it in the chat. Real quick, we're a convener. Judith mentioned our Horizons conference, which is a huge workforce and education event that we do every year. It'll be in DC this summer. And our center plays a huge role in that. We've been able to, among many other panels and discussions, actually live stream this to people who are incarcerated so that they're actually able to follow the Fair Chance series of panels that we put together for the event and actually participate. We actually have a colleague who is incarcerated in the state of Maine, my colleague Sean, and he's been able to moderate some of those. So always looking for innovative ideas, panelists and new people to highlight. And so maybe that's something we can discuss as well once we get into that portion of the conversation. And the final thing on the policy side, I will say we have a congressional staffing network and executive branch network. at JFF. This is, again, part of that team that does workforce and education writ large and not necessarily specific to criminal legal reform. But we do sort of educational site visits across the country, usually about twice a year, bringing congressional staff that work on those issues to the places that where just to see how the workforce system works or doesn't work, as it were. And so I've worked with our center to try to always pull in a component around the criminal legal system. So we have visited a prison in Nevada. The Hope for Prisoners program out there has American Job Center located in the prison, along with a number of other job training facilities. We're working on a trip to New Orleans this spring that'll incorporate a lot of reentry programming. So I wanted to mention that, a lot of what we're trying to do is about education, in addition to sort of advocacy. We're not necessarily lobbying at every turn. We're really trying to bring information about this and ideas. Um, so that's the basics of sort of our organization and what we do. A couple pieces about maybe how we do it. I did mention the Fair Chance to Advance initiative, and with support from Ascendium, which is a funder in this country, JFF is going to convene 4 states, which will each have state action networks. And over the course of 4 years, each of these states will receive up to $2 million in funding and technical assistance from us and our partner, the Coleridge Institute, essentially to look across silos, across policies, across different branches of government, different agencies to figure out and get down to the core of what is blocking and how do we expand fair chance hiring, with an especially heavy focus on prison education and job training behind bars. And so my component in that will be the policy side. Obviously, states have existing coalitions. Many of these states have done great work. They're sort of considered leading states in some degree. I should mention that these states were just announced a few weeks ago. We're going to be working with Kansas, Oregon, North Carolina, and Maine. And so I'm really looking forward to that. To the extent that there are folks here that are from those areas or have contacts, would love to hear from you and just get some background. I think we're not looking to come in and impose our will on these states. We're looking to facilitate a strong process that convenes people and makes them feel like they have ownership over what the right approaches are to getting people good quality jobs who are impacted by the system. So that's an exciting thing that's kicking off this year, and I wanted to mention. Any questions or thoughts at this point? I've gone on for a little while about sort of who we are and what we're about. I can get into some policy specifics in a moment, but anything before I move on? Oh, great, Dr. Taylor. Well, I'm so glad to meet someone in Kansas. We will have to definitely follow up. Thank you. Um, And I also have to say, I've been in DC. I should say I'm based in DC. I've been here for 17 years, but I did originally come from Western Massachusetts. So, Ms. Harrison, it's nice to see Western Mass represented up there.
Hey, I wanted to say, why aren't you going to come to Western Mass? And then I hear you're from Western Mass. We
That's
need
well,
you.
that's why I would have done it if I could. My mom's in
Oh,
Northampton. I grew up in North Adams.
oh, nice, nice. Well, we need that type of support down here. The fight is real.
Well, I'd love to hear about it sometime.
Okay, thank you.
Well, maybe what I could do is, I hope it would be useful to you all, is maybe just go over a couple of policy issues or narratives or ideas that we worked up in our policy agenda, but also have been in the ether, in the conversation among advocates, and are some things that I think maybe have legs or are maybe a little different than um, other issues that have been worked on, in the sense that it's not that these are the most important. There's so many huge things. We support, for example, clean slate automated expungement laws, which are hugely important. The Clean Slate Initiative is a leader in that area, and we support that wholeheartedly. But we're always looking for sort of a couple other lanes and some things that might be able to get done, and especially in a bipartisan way. Um, so many of these issues can be bipartisan, and uh, in my view, things being bipartisan is not important just for the sake of bipartisan and everyone getting along and shaking hands. It's about the longevity and sort of the broad agreement, people being on record as supporting successful reentry and you know, limiting the thumbprint of the system on people's lives. And so we're always working to sort of keep a lane open, no matter what's happening with difficult conversations around policing or crime or sentencing, to keep this conversation around workforce and education and people's value and building them up and getting good quality jobs, which everyone should support, keeping that open. And so that's a little bit of a lens I often put in a couple of these policies. I think that have struck out to me, or the stuck out to me as we've gone through some of the issues at JFF, and I'm sure you all have your own as well. But you know, one thing that we've been thinking about and talking about, and I already mentioned it a little bit with my colleague who's incarcerated in Maine, is the idea of remote work in prisons, as well as fair wage work. So these are tricky conversations. They're difficult, but there are states, and Kansas and Maine are among them, that are allowing people in prison to work remotely if they can obtain work. And looking at that, looking at what policy barriers might be in place, what resources might need to be established for that idea to grow is really something that I'm personally very interested in. I think it's complicated, but it certainly could be a really productive change in the narrative around the idea of work behind bars. Obviously, folks here know that large portions of the jobs in prison pay very little, as little as $1 a day or less. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but that is a serious and controversial issue. Many states have looked at it, but I really like this remote work and fair wage private industry work conversation because it sort of changes that narrative a little bit. And Yeah, and so we were very heartened to see that there are states where employers are coming in and hiring people at fair
Right.
wages to work behind bars. Again, not endorsing any particular program or saying that these are without issue, but the idea that somebody could make a real wage that actually is values the skilled work that they do at a company that could then hire them when they emerge.
Right.
We have reports of individuals on the remote front and the fair wage front, not only doing things that policymakers want to hear about, like paying off restitution or court fees, which is its own topic, the imposition of those and the burden that they place on individuals, but also doing things like purchasing a home so that they have a home upon release. And, I had an advocate at the Vera Institute reference this to me and point out that this is a way of skirting the barriers in housing that are so plentiful across this country. People cannot rent because of a criminal record in many areas of this country. And the idea that you might be able to purchase your own home with the money that you've saved, is an appealing one in terms of narrative. And when we're talking about advocacy and policy, we're always trying to think of a story or something that would catch policymakers' attention. And anytime you can focus on a positive alternative, like what actually could we do instead of, these low paying jobs, for example, this is a great thing. I'm sorry, I'm monitoring the chat to the extent I can. You all have so much great information. Um, yes, absolutely. Disability area. And again, these topics are topics that I'm going to keep track of and would love to follow up with you all about as we keep an eye on this. So, I wanted to raise that as an idea that is not an end all be all solution, but is something that when I think about policy and advocacy, I'm trying to think, what are the barriers to setting this up? And sometimes you hear administrative barriers about security or safety. Well, if one jurisdiction is doing it, what is it about that jurisdiction that can be replicated in other states? Which are the barriers that are real, and which are the ones that are only perceived,
Right.
or the limitations that are perceived? And where are there instances where we want to work internally with the agencies and the actors, and where are the situations when we want to go to the policymakers who have that oversight mission? Whether it's legislators or governors' offices to give a mandate to really look at this. Sometimes you can tear down barriers more quickly going through people that are sort of outside the system looking in and saying it doesn't make any sense that people can't work remotely and make money to while they're behind bars. So that's one thing I wanted to mention without hitting it too hard. The other we're looking at quite a lot is trying to come up with consistent, um, reliable funding streams for prison-based education and job training. Obviously, the opening up of Pell was a huge win. Many advocates, certainly before my time, should be credited with that huge, enormous win, and the implementation of that is something that JFF has been involved with, along with Vera and many others. But I will say that, when it comes to some of the job training programs or speaking with folks at the Hope for Prisoners initiative in Nevada, we've seen a real challenge getting consistent funding for these kinds of programs. Some states are using settlement money from a lawsuit or a governor's line item allocation. Um, and looking at the federal and state funding streams and saying, how do we get broad-based appropriation support in a way that makes it so that these programs are not special pilots or, miracle initiatives driven by the charisma of an incredible leader, which many of these are, Hope for Prisoners included. Uh, but how do we normalize that opportunity and ensure that this is just a humdrum part of the system as it works, that everyone has access to these high quality programs. So that's one thing that we look at, again, kind of speaking to that normalizing of opportunity question. Um, Obviously, a huge part of advocacy work in workforce-related criminal legal reform is around removing barriers. I don't need to go over the numbers for folks here, but just, we all know that there are more than 40,000 policy barriers in place for people with records. The majority of those are related to employment. The majority do not have a time limit. In other words, there's no uh, cutoff period at which they stop going into effect, which is something that I really think a lot about, given that the research about desistance and the fact that really, um, after even just a few short years, you really don't have a public safety argument when it comes to people's recidivism. Not that that's the only factor, but people desist from crime, and our policies do not reflect that when it comes to these 40,000 barriers we built up over time. So, you know, um, the reform in this respect, people are working on things that you all may be involved with on licensure reform and licensure protections, uh, entrepreneurship, following up on the comment from earlier in Allegheny County from Jeremy, getting business licenses. Um, Obviously, things like housing and the like, tearing down those barriers. Those are all things that we look at and work on and want to make sure are in place. Um, in addition to what I've talked about already, which is sort of the more proactive, expanding what works, expanding programs, expanding opportunities. It's very hard to make progress with that degree of barrier in place. Um, Yeah, the last kind of bucket I was going to mention was around hiring incentives. And, there's a lot of questions and controversy about things like the work opportunity tax credit, which is uh, federal law from the 90s that provides tax credit to employers that hire someone with a felony. Um, and sort of the ineffectiveness of that program at getting people with records into long-term, high-quality jobs. But the question of whether you could really build in incentives for hiring, I think goes beyond that. For example, when we talk to employers, a lot of what they say is that they're worried about legal liability. And to me, I'm not a lawyer, I should say, but here I am on YouTube expounding. So hopefully I don't get anything too off. But to me, that really means negligent hiring lawsuits. And some states have taken steps to really uh, narrow the circumstances under which that can be brought. I think that more could be done there, in my own view. I think this is something that could be bipartisan in nature. So I just want to highlight, a couple of issues that you might not necessarily think about that we feel could have an impact. Judith, I could go on, but I also want to make sure I'm opening things up and sticking to the formula, and you have your hand up as well.
Yes, I do actually. You brought up some points, and I just wanted to go back to where you mentioned that you have JFF has an employer network, and I wanted to know, number one, like what does that look like, the Fair Chance Employer Network that you guys have, and do other organizations have access to it? How can they, be involved in that network, from the sense of we have a lot of organizations out there that are really equipping people coming home with the right tools, the right, perspective, the right, formulas to getting employed. But then we really lack that network of truly hiring employers, that network where the employers will actually say, yes, I'll give you a chance, to be hired. And, for whatever reason, that doesn't happen quite often. So we're really giving a lot of tools to individuals, and then they really have a hard time getting that yes on that employment application, or that call back for that employment application. So my question to you guys is, that network that you guys are building, educated employers that are willing and wanting to be fair chance hiring, is that something that other organizations can connect to so that they can provide, that bridge for people to really be interviewed by people that, organizations, companies that are really going to give them a chance?
Yeah, of course. All that is so important. Um, I would say a few things. I would describe it less of a network and more of employers that have gone through our employer training cohort. And so there's various entry points into this, but it's a curriculum that we have where we're training employers on how to sell this within their companies, what HR policies to use, what is the data and research behind it, what are some tools. I'm not directly involved in that work, but we have great experts on that, led by our senior director, KO. And so I'll drop a link into the chat related to that work. Anyone would, of course, be welcome to reach out to my colleagues who can connect and reach through their Rolodex, of course. But I would also say that we do work closely with organizations that do represent more of a network of businesses. And one is the Second Chance Business Coalition,
Right.
coordinated with the Business Roundtable, and gathers large employers that are committed to this for conferences and gatherings, and giving them tools and the like. And so that's a great place to start. I also want to make a recommendation for folks that are interested to be in touch with RBIJ, the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice. We work with them in many respects. They have a great policy team, but they also have an actual network of employers that are involved in this work specifically. And so reaching out to that organization could also yield some dividends. And I see Jeremy dropping in the chat some county resources. I'm sure there's a lot at the local level when it comes to people having the same idea. We need an inventory of who is open to this. So those are a couple ideas without maybe trying to come off as comprehensive. And I'll drop links in the chat to a few of these resources. Any other thoughts or questions that are popping up? I'm really interested to hear what you all are doing with your work, or how this resonates, or things that you think maybe are off base based on your experience, or really anything. I can get a lot out of this conversation. I really hope to. So I hope it's been useful, but please let me know if you've got questions or thoughts.
Can I ask a question? So you said you was working like up in Maine, right? So, you know, when I first, I don't even think I was out of prison for 2 weeks. I actually went to a conference in Maine, and the work that they're doing up there in Maine is phenomenal with uh, their incarcerated people, and as far as jobs online, real jobs. Um, and the difference, I mean, I don't, I think I want to ask the question is like, how do we bring these people to the table? Because what you got to remember is prison and jails are different. Most jails are run by sheriffs, and you have, DOC. Um, and so it's different. And even with the jails, we talk about jails, right? The sheriffs are kind of like voted in, so they kind of do their own thing. So, the question is like, I would like to know is like how do we get like I'm Western Mass, so even for our jails to stop looking into what Maine is doing because they really are. I sat in that conference where the guy actually he is still in jail and has brought his own house. I just actually left. I was a panel on for untapped talent up in New Orleans, and if you see, the work that they're doing up there, it's like it would be nice, like trying to bring all these people together for them to see that some of these like that it is working, you
Right.
know. Mm-hmm.
Right. That's how I think about it in terms of policy is expanding or requiring or defaulting what is working well so
Mm-hmm.
that you can't really say that you have a system that is modern and current and up to evidence-based practices unless you're allowing people to take jobs remotely. Maybe that's a goal, you know. And then also disincentivizing, prohibiting, doing away with the things that are not. So easier said than done. But I think
Mm,
that's to your point, you
yeah.
know, it shouldn't be such a crazy thing that Maine has these policies in place. You should be able to
Yeah.
continue expanding it.
Mm, thank you.
I think you have
It's
another
just,
hand up.
yeah, this is Tamara. I'm from New York, and yes, we have snow. um, I love the advocacy stuff because I'm really into all that too. And the disability side is so similar to the prison side because it's 1 in 4 people in the United States have a disability. I'm just like listening in and thinking, how could we also work within together? Maybe there's people within the and rehab. What are we doing? We're trying to rehabilitate individuals who are in prison. It follows in the same space almost. So just thinking maybe, some of those individuals that are interested in the disability area would be interested in that.
Yeah. I think there's so many areas of advocacy and policy change where there are two different sort of spaces or
Hmm.
set of groups working on
Similar.
similar issues, but they don't necessarily communicate. You know, when I was working in youth justice, you would have youth justice advocates or criminal legal advocates working on diversion or alternatives to incarceration or reducing referrals to the system. And then you would have um, education advocates thinking about school discipline, but not really thinking about how those things connect and not knowing the research on either side. So I think there's a lot like that. And maybe the disability piece that you're speaking to is an area that we on the criminal legal reform side need to understand more deeply, or certainly I do.
Yeah. Just a thought.
We'd love to talk about it sometime.
I have also another thought. You mentioned, no, and please, if somebody else has a question, by all means. But you had mentioned, the 44,000 barriers to reentry and, what the struggles that people in reentry come with. And I know that there's been places or communities that have put out there the thought of a blanket protected class type of, advocacy for individual with records. What are your thoughts about that? And I mean, do you have any idea if that would be effective? Because I feel a lot of times that, being that there's so many barriers that we're chipping little spots of, the mountain, the huge mountain, because we are trying to remove it altogether, and we're working so hard and just chipping it off and off by creating access to barriers. I think that a blanket protected class opportunity would alleviate a lot of that. So what are your thoughts about that?
And you're speaking about sort of adding people with criminal records to the protected class, people that face discrimination.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not a lawyer, and so I always feel it's super important to say what you don't know. And this is not my deep area expertise, but um, I think it's certainly a possibility. I think that the challenge you're describing is real, that uh, you can pick away at 40,000 barriers, but you've really at a certain point got to figure out ways to skirt them. And that's what I think the Clean Slate initiative is about. But that's looking several years down the line. You know, these states have waiting periods before you can get an expungement of, in some states, 8, 10 years. It does allow you to say, I didn't commit a crime once you get your expungement, but you need to wait. And so what do we do in the meantime? Yeah, I don't know. I think it would be a great question for someone that does discrimination law. There's a great project called NELP, and Beth Avery is the Fair Chance director over there, and a great attorney. I would expect that they have great thoughts on that topic, and I maybe encourage reaching out to them. Um, I will say, I think there is, even though there is strong, wide-ranging support for policies that boost the workforce and get folks ready for employment, these things are not necessarily easy to get rid of. There is still resistance out there, you know. We found a collateral consequence in Missouri years back, and one legislator heard about it, and he's like, "I'm going to get rid of that." It was around young people. It was a scholarship for young people. You know, very difficult to get, very limited, but you get scholarship, and it barred young people that had a drug conviction. And so the idea of getting rid of that, and I remember a committee hearing where suddenly that comes up. People are discussing, well, what about this kind of drug? What about that kind of drug? And this is for a scholar. This is someone who might be eligible who has done everything right, you know. And I just think about that because it does remind me that there's people that will push back and say, well, what about this barrier? What about that? And those are important conversations to have. But I could imagine something like that coming up with sort of a blanket kind of a policy, and it's certainly a challenge. I hope that wasn't talking around your question, but definitely that is a huge issue. We didn't, we didn't create this system of 40,000 barriers by testing everyone with randomized controlled trials and making sure they were all evidence-based, but we're often expected to roll it back with evidence in hand that we will have zero impact, a negative impact in any community for any reason. And I think that your question and your idea is speaking to that challenge.
Thank you for that. It's just that we have the numbers. And so when I think about how many people in this country are affected by the criminal justice system, it's like we certainly have the numbers in population when it comes to, that type of group exemption. And I was just wondering, I know that there was an area in Georgia that they did a local ordinance where they have like a protected class, laws in place for particularly employment. But yeah, certainly clean slate. I hope that it gets to the federal level, but certainly clean slate gives us an opportunity in the long run to be able to move forward with those barriers.
Yes. And Dr. Taylor, I think that's a great point in the chat. I do see that sometimes, and it's sometimes, it's easy for me to say as an advocate doing policy to come and be like, the research says this, guys, don't worry, we got this, and we try not to do that because there are real challenges implementing things and on the ground. You don't want to sell people a bill of goods. But also, we've seen really strong change in areas of the law where large change was made. Things were mandated, things were prohibited. And this is my own personal view. I worked on this since you're in Kansas. I will say, like, I worked on a bill in Kansas that was around the youth justice system, and it was very large, significant changes, and people were very worried about the consequences, and it was difficult to implement, but it really made a significant change and difference in the state, and it sort of broke the dam, I think, or whatever the analogy is, set the goalposts far enough out that the minutia that they were dealing with was suddenly on a lot larger scale. And so as a policy advocate, that's my preference, but obviously there's a lot to be discussed about different tactics and strategies.
Well, awesome. If you guys don't have any other questions, Noah, I really want to thank you for this very interesting and educational conversation, and the points that you brought across really resonated a lot of questions to me as to, what this work looks like. And it really boils down that this is hard work. This is slow to progress work. And so that resiliency, that, perseverance has to be in place. But I think that when you have the right heart in place, that's going to continue on. And so I hope that we are able to be that bridge to provide you with the support, the networks, the tools, and the knowledge necessary to continue on that hard work that you're doing in your respective communities and your respective spaces. And again, you know, Noah, you guys, JFF, I mean, it's phenomenal work. I can't wait to see what this state action networks are going to look like. And so that I can really point Florida to be, okay, look, they're doing it. They're doing it. I'm constantly going, look, they're able to do it. I'm sure that we can do it. And so they'll be able to see, and more states will be able to see that it's successful and that it's happening in other places so that they can come on board in this, you know, nationwide, you know, revising or revamping of our, you know, our journey to reentry. I want to just real quick, a couple of housekeeping concepts. If you haven't yet, please join us on our monthly state and federal community coalition. Oh goodness, sorry. Committee meeting. Apologize for the jargon. Committee meeting. We always, you know, talk about what's happening at the federal level, at the state level. We come together to discuss, you know, those particular policies as we can bring you resources. Also, don't forget that we have incorporated our state education and workforce advisory collaborative. I'm really happy to say that we have great warriors in this space. We have great speakers that come to impart their knowledge and expertise into this collaborative participants. And I can't wait to see the results of the work that they'll be able to do and push forward in their respective states. And the links are put on chat for all of that. A couple of other items that are coming up. You mentioned, you know, Horizon Summit. If you haven't enrolled yet, I believe enrollment is open. Correct, Noah? For the Horizon
Yes.
conference. And that will be in Washington, D.C., July 13th to the 14th this year. We also have NCHAP conference coming up in April at Cleveland, Ohio. If you haven't joined that community as well, great spaces to be involved in the conversation. These are in person. We also have Stop the Stigma. That's virtual. That's coming up February 19th. There's open enrollment on there as well. So that will be very accessible because it doesn't require travel. And from my end, that's what I have. I don't know if you guys are having any conferences that you want to share real quick and in your communities or something that you think that we should be involved in. Feel free to put it in the chat. We can always circulate it to our membership as well. And I'll be seeing you guys February 23rd. That's our next month meeting. As you know, this is again, every month we have a speaker, an expert in the field and in our space. And so, you know, we're really excited that we were able to have Noah this month and provide all of this great information and work that JFF is doing. He's put his information on the chat, so please feel free to reach out to us, to reach out to him, to get connected, because again, we are about breaking the silos. We are about bridging, coming together, providing a cohesive front so that our voices are stronger, because it will be stronger together. It takes a village. You guys are part of the village. Become active in it. All right.